It's your boy, Remoy George Philip the First.
And I'm Samantha and Zessie.
This is MASKulinity.
The show that investigates the performance of masculinity in the world today, and you know we spell it with a hard K.
So, Samantha.
Yes, Remoy?
Remember what I said in our last episode, the one with the old Beto?
It's the Undertaker. It's the Mastermind. It's the Ultraman. Just kidding. I forgot all the names, but I'm just doing it with like a Rory voice. But you get what I mean. It's wrestling, baby.
The Pasta Smasher. The Ravioli Smasher.
That's correct. Anyway.
We're not...
I'm way too into this.
I can tell you, and we're not talking wrestling today.
Okay, well, what are we talking about? Can we just go back to talking wrestling? Just kidding. What are we talking about?
Okay, so you remember how we were going to call you out on like you getting married and marriage and your participation in that construct? Remember that?
Pop quiz. We're talking about me not getting married today?
Actually,
what?
That's not today. It's not happening today. We're going to do that soon. We're not doing that today, though.
Okay, well, so what are we doing then? Please tell me.
Samantha's marital bliss lives one more day as we go into our archives and revisit a classic. That's coming up right after this break.
Curious about next-gen men? We're a small part of a much larger movement to undefine masculinity for a brighter future. Our mission is clear: empower the next generation to use their curiosity, empathy, and courage to build a more equitable world. Join the Next Gen Men community as we learn and unlearn together. We're here to support boys and men to break free from limiting stereotypes. We're not just an organization, we're a catalyst for reimagining masculinity and fostering inclusivity. We're here to help open up possibilities for what men and boys can be. Explore the world of Next Gen Men at nextgenmen.ca and join the community to make a difference. Next Gen Men, shaping tomorrow's leaders one step at a time. Join us and help undefine masculinity and empower the next generation of men to lead with empathy and courage.
Samantha.
Yes, Remoy.
Samantha.
Yes.
I don't know if you can tell, but after working on a history podcast, that's Not Past It for all those who don't know, who've never heard. Go listen to Not Past It on Spotify. Wish it was another podcast platform that's not, because Spotify sucks and they're evil. But whatever, still go listen to it because it's a great show. And I reported on it for years. It was great. Anyway, but for having reported for them for so long, I love going back in time. Can you tell with all this energy I'm bringing? Wow, I found the crack cocaine. That's cool.
I'm really happy for you. Yeah, I'm happy for you. But you sure it's not because you grew up a suburban emo kid?
How dare you?
Emphasis on the emo.
How dare you?
Breaking news, everyone.
And she says I'm a stoic. I'm so stoic. I don't have emotions. I'm just one beat Remoy.
Well. To give you a little bit of credit, you have said in the past that you contain multitudes, was it? A multiplicity of tudes.
You know what else does?
Here we go.
Yes, history. History contains multitudes, especially some masculinity podcast history. Am I right? Oh, okay.
Okay. Oh, yeah. You know what? I like this dimension of you. I'll take it. Can I keep this Remoy? Let's go ahead and keep this tude around much longer. We like this facet. We like this energetic.
I mean, it really only lasts like 5 seconds, like other things in my life. Other dimensions. Never mind. Go with me, if you will, Samantha. We're at your apartment. I really do think we were at your apartment, and like we're setting up a virtual interview. And this is before like the Zoom days, before everybody's doing virtual meeting. That whole revolution. You know what I mean?
I know. Oh my God, that was before we had real technology. It was before the internet. Well, not exactly. Oh,
it wasn't, but it kind of was, you know? And like I'm having all these like interfaces and cables and microphones, and I lug them to your apartment. I set them up. I think that's what we did.
Yeah, those Shure microphones. You had them in a little plastic case. This is great. Remoy's AV Club Nerd Multitude, everyone. It was awesome. It was a time.
I'm really proud about that. I'm really proud. You know, in 90s, you would have made fun of me, but in like the 2020s, 2018s, I was a fucking G, man. Anyways, we get that all set up and we call up an actor, a comedian, an artist, and it completely just goes to shit. So my AV multitude sank, but it's fine. Whatever, it's fine.
Yeah, because I'm not as technical as you, still don't know exactly what went wrong. I just know that we were like, damn, look at this wonderful human who's ready to interview with us.
Yeah, like I had a cord plugged into my phone, and that was plugged into an interface, and something was all messed up, and there were all sorts of echoes, and D'Lo was just like trying to be patient and calm with us, but you could tell he was getting a little frustrated.
Yeah.
But we got through it. We got the interview in.
Facts.
And I think it's one I want to revisit today.
Stuck with us.
Well, Samantha, I said actor, I said comedian. It's a tiny, brief intro on who D'Lo is. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, so D'Lo is an artiste, right? But also has this incredible story of growing up trans in a Tamil Sri Lankan family. And, on his acting, has been on a lot of things. Transparent, Sense8, Mr. Robot, and
Remoy favorite, Mr. Robot.
Hey, I need to add that to my playlist. And of course, the Issa Rae produced Minimum Wage. Shout out to Issa, always and forever. Please come to the MASKulinity podcast anytime you'd like.
I got a bad Issa Rae podcasting story, but that's for another time.
What? No. All your favorites are awful. Anyways, but maybe most importantly, D'Lo has got the style. You can always find D'Lo in like the crispest fitted, okay?
Or snapback. They look crisp.
That's facts. On most days you'll catch him in a blazer, uni-colored. We don't fuck with prints.
And like typically angelic South Asian skin. Let's be real. Me and D'Lo got the skin. You know what I mean?
I mean, I don't love to compliment you all the time because, for obvious reasons. But yes, you and D'Lo do share that in common. You've got it just looks like you've been getting a facial for the past 3 years and the rest of us have just been in the sun. But anyway, I digress. He was the perfect guest for our episode titled Transitioning into Immigrant Masculinity.
Yeah, I think we recorded it back in like 2018, I believe.
Yep, that was it. When I was just a baby, I was 33. Wow. Do
you remember what your 33-year-old self was hoping to get out of this interview?
Hope, promise. No, but seriously.
How does that feel now?
No, I think it was like important to get his perspective. Obviously we're both from like immigrant families and everything. So, it was important to get that experience on the mic and specifically just hear the intricacies of like understanding masculinity in that sense.
Yeah, well said. If since we're 6 years out now, I'd love to revisit that and go back in the time machine, listen to some clips I've pulled and talk through what we think it meant to us back in the day and what it means to us now. How does that sound?
You want me to answer we're back in 2018? Because I could do that. I could be 33 every day. Okay. Please take me back.
We all wish we could. Not necessarily, but kind of. I think it's informative to our listeners and maybe even more to us as the host of the show to see how much has changed, how much we've changed, or maybe what hasn't, over the years. So I'll just ask you how you thought you might have felt when we actually were interviewing D'Lo and heard his gems, and then what you think about it now. How does that sound?
Yeah, it's kind of like a podcast trust fall, if you will. I dig it.
Wow. Cool. Somebody's been working in big tech too much. Am I right? Huh?
The bigger they are, the harder they fall, right?
Well, I'm glad you said fall because let's just fall away into that first clip. Here we go.
Growing up, I was always the, I guess, more masculine of the two daughters that my parents had. And the thing is, nobody gave me flack for it either. And so I was left alone. I looked like a little boy. I acted like a little boy. All my friends were boys. And I had toys that were meant for boys. And nobody gave me any heat for that. But at some point, as I was growing up, I think it was around 5th and 6th grade, I realized that people were starting to sniff that I was different and that understanding was not cool. I remember when I was even younger to that and realizing that there weren't girls who had crushes on other girls. And I was like, but I'm a boy and I have a crush on a girl. It's just because I have a vagina that people are calling me a girl, So by the time I was 11-ish, I started my transition. I always talk about it as my first gender transition was me becoming a woman, becoming a girl. And I guess it's like my disguise of being perceived as a woman.
Yeah. So Samantha, what do you think this meant to you in 2018 to 33-year-old Samantha? You know what I mean?
So we're obviously talking about the performance of masculinity, right? So like there's like a performance of maleness or of manhood. And it was interesting hearing D'Lo say that the first transition that he made was transitioning into being a woman, because he was never, a woman before. So it was like he had to do that transition first to perform the gender as it was accepted for his community. But then eventually it just simply didn't work, like, because none of it is a chosen way of living, right? It's like who you are inherently and who he was inherently. And so this notion of like having to navigate between performing genders, right? One, putting on the mask for society, and then finally taking off the mask and being who he really is. So just really, really, really interesting to hear like that, especially at such a young age.
Well, now it's like you're more learned. I've moved back to Oakland, Samantha Self. What do these words mean to you now?
Ooh, we hope so. Really what comes up is this notion of like fighting for who you really are, and this notion of liberation, right? And like, I think we've talked about this before, where it's, where we've coded all these different things about gender and everything. But at the end of the day, I think what we're all looking to do is be like our full, and I know you hate this word, but authentic, like self, like people who are liberated and able, like free to be who we are. And I think that, this is what this looks like for D'Lo, and like him being able to put his perspective and his experience out there is something that I think anybody can relate to, and so I appreciate the fact that, he had the wherewithal and the language to describe his experience this way, because a lot of people don't have the language and a lot of people don't have the courage to do that.
Well, now let's go to our next clip. D'Lo talks to us about what he felt from the outside world as he's affirmed his gender identity.
Like, I don't believe that I am being masculine, and yet that is what I am being. There's a blend, because how I exhibit my masculinity is with the same love that wasn't shivved out of me. You know what I'm saying? It has a different flavor, because in my feminine presentation, I was encouraged to be more tender and loving and all of this stuff. That's what my masculinity involves right now, is that it might look to some people like a blend of feminine qualities and masculine qualities. But in my mind, I'm like, this is our problem, is that we've associated hardness, anger, all of that stuff with masculinity. And we've associated like softness, love, all of this stuff with femininity. And that's the problem. It's like, why can't women be assertive and hard and fierce and it not be called masculine, but it still be called feminine? And why can't cis men be loving and tender and kind and it still be seen as masculine?
Yeah. So when you first heard this in like 2018, like, what do you think it meant to you? Had you like thought about gender like this before, like as fluid as D'Lo kind of describes it here?
I don't think I had gotten there quite yet, but I do. In researching for this podcast, and I interviewed you for the show when we were first kind of starting out or whatever. Like, it became clear to me that there's like certain things that a lot of men that I knew would not feel comfortable doing because it was not associated with masculinity, right? And like, in a way that I could kind of relate on the woman side, being somebody who like definitely identifies as a woman, but doesn't always feel feminine. Like, I don't think that feminine is like a way that I like would always describe myself. And so it was like really great to hear D'Lo create that nuance. And we had already been kind of talking about it, but and I think you have pointed this out too, that why do certain traits need to be associated with femininity or masculinity? Like, why can't they just be traits that humans have? And then when you start to peel things apart, you realize that it's like, it's all for control's sake, right? And so I think that that's kind of, you know, hearing this in 2018, I think was kind of an affirmation of what the show was trying to do, which was to really pull apart these concepts and to really, hopefully, try to like name them so we can free ourselves from them a little bit more.
Well, then how has it changed to now?
I think I kind of feel the same way about it. I think that one thing that's coming up a lot is 2018 when we did this, I knew a lot less about like non-binary folks, about people who didn't identify with gender in general. And I just knew less. And so I feel like now, you know, it's great to hear Dilo's perspective, because while a lot of people can identify with him and what he has to say about like femininity, masculinity, there's so many more perspectives out there than what we perceive when we think about the gender spectrum. The world is really vast, and there are a lot more perspectives, I think, than we accounted for. And there's still more to discover around that. Like, I feel like when I hear that now, I feel like I know even less, and I want to get to know even more.
Yeah, I think something specific about Dilo's identity that makes it special and profound is like he comes from an immigrant family, right? And I think I got a clip pulled here about his like family story. So let me play that.
My father and mother are both from Jaffna, Sri Lanka, and my father is a family practice doctor and got a residency in Queens. And then I was born in Queens, and then we moved to Lancaster, California. And I'll tell you, this town is just an hour away from Los Angeles, but a world apart. Lancaster historically has a legacy of being the place where the first West Coast church for the KKK, I say church in quotes, was established. And Palmdale is a sundown town, and Lancaster, I think, was grouped in with that. We survived and thrived. You know, we were all flies in the buttermilk out there.
Okay, Remoy, so I can hear why you picked this one. But what do you think this meant to you back then?
Yeah, I think this is like really interesting because like going back in time, like you remember I was a little bit more of an arrogant piece of shit prick and like whatever, but a lot of that was probably making up for insecurity. Samantha laughs at my insecurity. That's fine, whatever. And I think a lot of that insecurity was like feeling so much alone in my identity. And like to hear this kind of story for the very first time, I was like, whoa, this is so much like my experience growing up in a white area in a physician-led home, South Asians fleeing for like opportunity and safety in America, but it all being white and conservative and whatever. And so like to hear this for the first time, and the fact that like Dilo was doing all this work around gender and identity and sexual orientation and desire, but out of a pace that was so personal, it was like special, but it also felt like in the fringes, like, oh, Dilo's so cool, but they're in the fringes. And it was interesting and cool. And it was like one of the first times I had ever experienced that, hence why it felt like it was like in the periphery and not the mainstream. Does that make sense?
I think so. I mean, you know, like how has this changed for you?
I think that's what's exciting. Like now Dilo's story isn't one of like a few. It's like one of many. And like there's been a dramatic shift where more and more voices have come out and experiences have come out. And all I can see are like the immigrant minority voices who are the real fighters and the warriors, the ones that are not only desperate for change, but actively trying to make change. And it's more so like me kind of skeptical like it was in 2018 of like, this is cool, but it's in the fringes, to now being like, no, this is badass and this is what the world needs. And so it's cool to see that there was like a start and a growth and a change, and to see and be aware of. And whether it's my own like relativity to like others and these like active voices fighting for change, and the fact that there are just so much more people sharing their stories and fighting and working together to like make change. That's pretty cool.
I agree. Because I think one of the things that you're bringing up that is like so important is the fight that it that it's taken for people to get here. It is lovely to have all these perspectives. And like, I want to shout folks out because the only reason why we have all of these perspectives is because people are sharing their perspectives and they're fighting to have their voices heard, and they're fighting to, create a new understanding and a new perspective of what gender isn't, and also like what it means for people to be liberated and to be heard as they are. So like, big shout out for that. Big shout out for that.
I think a lot of like the ways that people need to be heard or want to be heard kind of stems from their like gender story based on like what they saw at home, like their representation at home, meaning the people they grew up, their caregivers, their parents, maybe even their siblings. Do you actually remember what D'Lo said about what he saw growing up with his parents?
I don't think I remember. I don't think so, no.
Well, perfect, because I got a clip and we'll hear it right now.
So my father, I think that masculinity to me was, appearing to be strong and not emotional, and strength being based off of how much emotion you show. It's a typical immigrant macho sort of masculinity. It is one that, there's no room for softness. Like, the more masculine you are, the more respect you got. Growing up, I saw my mother as weak. And, I understood later, like, her so-called weakness was actually just her being a fully rounded emotional person. And I understood that the tables were actually turned if we were really supposed to be looking at, like, who was emotionally stronger in the relationship was always my mother.
So Samantha, I kind of know how you feel about your own mother-father gender dichotomy now, but what was it back, in 2018?
I think in 2018, I was like coming on the heels of apologizing to my mom for not like knowing what she dealt with as I was growing up. Like, I didn't realize like the depth, like what misogyny and sexism and racism, and especially when it's because my mom, it's important to remember, my mom had dealt with it on the French side and she had also dealt with it on the American side. And so like I hadn't actually grasped what that was. And I think this was around the time that in 2018 where I started to kind of understand it. So I had just apologized to her about this. And then, listening to D'Lo talk about, this adjustment in perspective for his own mom was like, I got it, like I understood, because I was like, people don't really know. I mean, unless you're the one going through it, you have a similar experience. Like, people don't really know what it is.
Well, has that changed for you?
I wouldn't say it's changed. I would say it's evolved because now I have a different understanding of like so I think one of the things in 2018, which I think I've shared with you offline, is that I didn't really understand. Like, I didn't have like a real concept for my own anger. Like, I thought, like many people thought that like, I feel like this is kind of like the internalized misogyny where without really consciously knowing it, like, I just didn't really think of myself as being able to feel anger. At worst, it could be like frustration or desperation, but it wasn't really like anger in the way that we imagine like a big man being angry type thing, which was also gendered. And so now that I've had a lot more access into my own anger, why societally women have a right to be angry while non-binary folks have a right to be angry, while LGBTQ folks have the right to be angry, while Black and brown folks of all genders have a right to be angry. This definitely puts things in perspective, because even if there was like this love that D'Lo's mother felt, there was probably an anger that she was also tempering. And then as far as like the father goes, like this anger that he had was probably hiding so much more beneath the surface, which like, I think now we kind of understand like the complexity of that, the complexity of what that can look like for someone.
What I think is interesting is like towards the end of the episode, like about like identity and stuff like that, you asked him actually about all his identity hats, like that he has to wear. Like he's Sri Lankan, immigrant, queer, trans, poet, actor, and the list goes on and on and on. And then you asked him like how he manages all that. Do you remember?
I think I actually might remember this. I feel like it was pretty special.
Yeah, it was really special. Let me play that clip.
I identify as an artist first and foremost. And this is not to take away from how I ID as somebody of Tamil Sri Lankan descent, as a queer and trans person, et cetera, et cetera. But the place that I feel is the foundation for my contribution in this world is as an artist. And that lens is Tamil, Sri Lankan, American, queer, trans. Like, in no way, shape, or form am I trying to pull the IDs apart. Like, it all lives in one place. But the easiest way that I can explain it is that all my identities get to be powerfully used in my role as an artist in this world.
Okay, so beautiful clip. But I really love to hear why you picked this one.
Yeah, I think now it speaks to me so much more because I think so much of my identity is tied up in so many things similarly. My family's from Kerala. I'm Indian, but I was born in Texas and I live in New York. So it's hard when you have all these things. And I just really like Dilo's confidence and just using this term that is more used in industry and being successful and famous and important. I'm an artist, right? But no, he uses that as a term to better understand who he is amidst all his multitudes, right? And I think it's so special for him to use that now and for me to identify with that now as if I'm going to keep calling, or if I'm going to see Dilo as this outspoken warrior and person who's been fighting and paved the way for a lot of us to do the same, then it's even more empowering to hear it from him and to take that mantle on now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, honestly. And I mean, I think one thing that you bring up, which I think is really in the flavor of the Dilo episode, this Dilo episode, is the fact that being an artist is about an expression of the self, right? It's about an expression of who one has become. And so all of these hats, right, that he has, all these identities that he carries, he's able to put that out into the world for himself also, but also for the world to be enriched. Yeah, I love this notion of artistry for the sake of expression rather than artistry for the sake of commodity and the sake of consumerism, right? It's actually about just expression and connection. Do you think you thought, for you though, do you think you thought the same thing back when we recorded this?
I was definitely on that path. I was on that way. If go back maybe 5, even 6, 7 years before, I was definitely going to school to be a writer, right? And I was desperate to be a writer, but I also felt this anxiety, I need to be a writer. I don't know how to be a writer. I don't know what I'm doing. And all this anxiety to be something. And then by 2018, when I got to this point, I was like, man, fuck out of here. I write, bitch. I do all these things. I don't need to be, quote unquote, any sort of thing. I'm just Remoy and I do what I think. And I'm contain these, not to be corny, multitudes, but there's so much about me that is multifaceted and rich and interesting, and I'm curious about it all, and I want to explore it all, and I never want to stop adding more hats to wear and live the life that I can live and make it as full as possible. And this was definitely a dope benchmark along the way to hear another badass South Asian kind of say that thing and own it in this very specific way. And I was like, word, I'm with that.
I'm glad, because I feel like this is exactly the type of thing that art should do, right? Is that it pulls folks in with its relatability and shows something possible that maybe wasn't before, especially for, when it comes to immigrant kids growing up in white communities and questioning everything about who they are, why they were brought here, and then specifically in this situation, questioning things about gender.
Yeah, it's a really special episode. I'm glad we got to go into the time machine. And, if folks want to hear all of what Dilo has to share in that original episode, you can find it wherever you listen to your podcast. Just scroll on the Masculinity feed until you find the episode titled Transitioning into Immigrant Masculinity.
Yep. And we'll actually just like share a link to that episode in the show notes for this one. So it'll be a nice, an easy, smooth click for y'all. So you can also find it online at our website, masculinitypod.com. It's always going to be with that hard K because you know it don't stop.
You'll probably see it in our socials too. That's if you follow us on socials. So just type at MasculinityPod, always with a K, and give us a follow wherever you do your social game at.
And if you're following us on IG, you'll see our recent episode of Beneath the Mask with Easy Chan, which was amazing. I really suggest you go and check that out. I got to go even further into her matriarchy episode. It's called the matriarchy episode. Check it out.
And you also talked about how awesome I was. Duh.
You know, actually, we did. In this way, I'm not even gonna, we did have a little moment. It was cute. If you were on the socials, you would have been there for it, but I had to telepathically send it to you because you are reading
Remoy.
a book, which is fine. No problem.
No, I'm being Remoy. Like Dilo's being Dilo, I'm being Remoy. That's how it is.
Yeah. And get ready for our next episode on IG Live, right? We're gonna have Beto O'Byrne with us talking about his episode where we're talking about well, I mean, I can see it in your eyes, Remoy. Why don't you go ahead and tell him?
Oh, yeah. That's like wrestling. That's the Macho Man. Because we talked about wrestling with Beto O'Byrne. Am I right?
Okay. Yes. But also what I need to do is for everybody to write in a comment about how your life has been touched, moved, and inspired by Remoy's emotional side. Look at him just expressing himself.
Do you smell what the Rock is?
roaring,
What was like Stone Cold's like? It was just like a middle finger and like a FU. God, so much catharsis out of Stone Cold when I was a child. Good time.
Wow. You should tell us more about that on the next Beneath the Mask when you get your social media account. That would be awesome. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. We know that's not happening, but it was worth the shot, guys. You will see me and Beto continue to chop it up and wonder why Remoy is not there to work with us.
Well, folks, until then, I'm your boy Remoy George Phillip, the first.
And I'm Samantha and Desi. Thank you so much for listening.
Peace.
Ciao.
All right.
I know, right?
We got pep in her step. Pep in her step.
There's no pep in my step.
So excited.
I gave all the peps away.
It's crack cocaine.